Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new webinar series with the title Renewal and Innovation. My name is Tom Wittig, and I will be leading you through this webinar. And the contact information will be given a little bit later in the webinar. If you want to follow us on the web address is constellation.wittigonia.net. In today's webinar, we're going to cover only a few topics. This webinar is actually a kickoff, so an initial webinar for a series which is starting right now and which will take us through the course of this year and probably beyond. So first, I will speak a little bit about the concept of renewal and innovation, and also I would like to expand a little bit more on the reason why this became such a prominent topic in the work with family and organizational constellations. Then I will give some examples and some first examples, I should say, and also provide some how-to information. So what was the context and how did it actually work out? And then I will provide some outlook about the upcoming topics. But as always in the work of systemic constellations, it really develops as we go forward. So the topics will come flowing in, both from the actual live work in the live workshop sessions, seminars, and training sessions, as well as from the feedback from you and the experience that people share within the webinars and on our Facebook properties and so on. And then I will conclude today with a live Q&A here in the webinar. So there are a couple of people who provided some questions up front during the sign-up process. So I will engage on that topic a little bit, but feel free to ask questions here live. And then it will be followed by, let's say, also a Q&A on the Facebook pages, which I will explain in a minute. So let's talk about innovation and renewal. And I would like to start with the topic, which has been a center of my work over the last few years. My background basically is from the business world. So I have been in several leadership positions in both fast-growing companies as well as worldwide responsibilities for some major companies. And I was wondering what was happening with the aspects of both the leadership aspects in the organization, but also especially renewal and innovation. And then at some point in time, it occurred to me that this is a common theme, which is not only prominent in the workplaces, but very much so in our own personal life and in our family relationships or couple relationships. And the first idea that I had about this topic, the first image, was to work on the topic of innovation. And then later on, I discovered that the better word for it is to work under the name of renewal. And here's why I came up with these ideas. So when I thought about innovation, it felt like there's always an intention, and it's about a state rather than a movement. And then innovation always is looking for results. So it is actually very purposeful, very intentional driven. And it occurred to me that the expression and the word innovation is fairly narrow. And so I gravitated more towards working under the name of renewal, because renewal is an unfolding movement. It's a process. And it's not a certain state of mind, but it's an ongoing process which happens, let's say, on a much wider scale. And when I arrived at this conclusion and this insight, I suddenly realized that renewal is something that happens in every aspect of our life, in pretty much every moment, and even in our bodies. there's a constant stream of renewal, even down to the cellular level. So this really got me interested, and I thought that, you know, this kind of permanent movement for renewal finds its expression in our daily life, and also in the relationships between people and in organizations. The dimensions that we are looking at are manifold. So change and also the decay is omnipresent, which means it's with us all the time. And so there is a need for renewal, which keeps us alive as human beings, but there's also a need for renewal to keep relationships alive and organizations alive. So the areas that we will cover over time here in this series are, of course, topics which are in the realm of families and partner relationships, but also in organizations. That has become an focus topic, of course, for me, given my background and leadership experience in several industries. But when I started actually the work with the family constellation, I always wanted to move quickly to the question of what is happening in organizations, and how can we use family constellations or systemic constellations to basically do a better job and provide better leadership or optimize an organization, things like that. And then through my work, and basically with the work with Bert and Sophie Hellinger, the founder of the family constellation work, I first learned that everything hangs together with the family, of course. So I took a major detour, I would call it, a very good detour, and learned about family constellations. And this is really the foundation. But it's also rooted in the personal work and our personal movements and our own soul and spirit mind. So that is, of course, the foundation. And nothing can be seen isolated. Often we think that you know, the things that we have going on in the workplace, we bring into the family and the relationship. But vice versa, it is also true that everything that happens within us and in our families is carried over into the organization. So it finds its expression there. And that's why we have to take a systemic view on any issue, regardless if we look at it from a family or personal level. But in a nutshell, the renewal and innovation is a process that is in the service of life. It is serving life, and that's what makes it so important. Let me give you some examples of key challenges and what we are experiencing and what we heard from participants over the years. Oftentimes, what we hear is we are stuck with our business or our startup. I'm stuck in let's say, in a previous job, or I have repeated experiences which look all the same, and I can't seem to move forward and beyond the current state. That is already an interesting indication of something that has to do with the renewal and innovation, even self-renewal, I would say, on a personal level. If we go for a moment into the area of relationships and couple relationships, we often encounter these questions, and we ask ourselves, or we need to ask ourselves, what drives us apart? What are the things that make us want to drift away from each other? And what are the things that keep us together? And how can we proceed? So these are the basic and fundamental questions. Of course, the nuances and the movements are very different from person to person, from relationship to relationship, from family to family, of course, because we all bring our own personal systems, if you want, into the relationship. So in the work of family constellations, for example, we first ask the question, who belongs to the system. And the same question, of course, we need to ask in the context of organizations. And like with the couple relationship, the question is also how can the renewal be initiated and started again, so that it leads to a very healthy and a very good relationship and a good solution for everybody. Or maybe the relationship is not the solution, and then the question is how can the participants and the partners become free again to move forward. Career choices are another important question. It's not only a matter of left or right, or where should I go, but this is the most obvious question that we face in our work, that somebody says, okay, I don't know what to do, I have choices, or maybe in another situation I don't have choices right now. But it's also increasingly a question of purpose. The times when people just want to go to work and make money or earn a lot of money, I think these times are almost over. And we have also a new generation of people who are looking more for meaning and purpose in the work. And that brings with itself another set of key questions, of course. Let me give you a couple of examples from the work, and this is based on my personal work with organizations on the topic of innovation and renewal. This is an illustration from a constellation that I facilitated with a group of startups, and there was one which I found very interesting. And it, of course, generated some insights and learning for the group as a whole, because as it always happens, or most often happens with the constellations, there is an insight which is relevant to everybody, because during a constellation, people find themselves in a field, or what we call a morphogenetic field or a knowing field. Now, in this constellation, the starting point was that the founder of the startup was in a crisis. The whole company was in a crisis. The investors were reluctant to bring in more money and to allocate more resources. And also the customers were increasingly hesitant, because they were not sure what is happening with this company. Should we trust this company, the founders? And so it led again and again into a crisis, until it became a really serious situation. And one of the key insights here was, of course, that the money represented by the former investors, and I should say that in the area of startups, we often talk about the friends and family rounds of investors that give the first are the first people who give the money, and then followed by the so-called angel investors, or then later on by more institutional investors. But oftentimes the startups struggle with getting beyond the first round. And what we found in this organization, which was actually true for many startups in the group, was that they didn't really regard the money that was coming in first. And this is one of the fundamental orders that we have to know in order to understand the entanglements in such a situation. It is not only so that money has also its own form of energy, but along with the money, and in this case the financing, the funding, it is also associated to a certain very principal order. And that order says that those who were there first have a higher rank. And this is also true for investors in a company. Now, in this particular very specific constellation, it unfolded when the founder actually turned around and looked at the group of the early investors, and everything was unfolding from there. This is a good example how a family constellation in the context of organization and in the context of innovation and renewal can give us some indication and some insights on where to look for a solution and where it starts. And we don't have to necessarily do something with it. It often happens that it just unfolds in the subsequent time. Another interesting constellation that I had the privilege to facilitate was from a participant who asked about a very specific situation. So she was working in an international organization, and there were two departments and two group of countries who were fighting with each other over who would be responsible and who should take the lead for negotiation between the countries. And the topic was about poverty, or how to deal with poverty. But rather than the two groups finding a solution and agreeing with each other, the solution was found by the representative, in this case, for poverty, taking one group by the hand. I think it was the groups of the poorer countries, and leading them to the other group of the richer the more rich countries in the world. And this provided a very important insight to the participants. And I can also say that it was a very moving and a very touching experience for everybody who was participating and observing in this constellation. So here we see an example of a larger context, which impacts many people, of course. And I want to speak for a moment a little bit more with some facts to also provide the broader context. So here we're switching a little bit to the rational mind. And I found these statistics quite interesting. This is from let's say, an institution in Germany, which is concerned with basically developing the small and medium enterprise business sector, etc. And what they found was actually that there is a demographic change, of course, happening, and there are more and more companies in in Germany, it's called the Mittelstand, which is the small and medium enterprise sector. And there are more and more company owners which are coming of age. And they are also not investing that much anymore. So this was the second really interesting insight here. So here on this curve, you see how over time, when the owners were aging, their portion of net new investment in their business was declining. Okay, so obviously that may make a lot of sense, because if they don't have a successor in their business, then it would lead them to throttle down the investment. And that is the particular issue here, because many companies are struggling to find a successor and a succession candidate for various reasons. We will come to that in a minute. Now, the implications are really important, because if you take really the numbers and combine them together, according to an OECD statistics, about 60 to 70% of the jobs in many national economies come from the small and medium enterprise sector. And that's what we're talking about here. So this is the sector which has the biggest problems with succession planning and succession candidates. And of those companies, of these 70%, 80% are challenged by this demographic change. So they are struggling to find successors. Only 20% of companies in the sector have, let's say, owners or managers or founders which are in a younger age. So this is a particular problem, because think about all these jobs and also the families who are tied to all these jobs. So that's why we can see that this is an important topic. Now, a very typical situation for a succession planning might look something like this. So we have the owner here, which is the person on the left-hand side with the red suit. And he or she might have different choices to find a successor candidate for the organization. It could be an internal successor candidate, the green person over here in the background. And it could be their own children, but oftentimes what we find is that the children do not want to take up the work from the family owner and the family founder, and that can have different reasons. And there could be a buyer, but also the buyer is sensing if he or she is buying into a company which is sustainable. So is this a good solution for everybody? Because no successor or no buyer wants to join a company which cannot go forward. So the question is, can this succeed? And here in this example illustrated, the company in the middle is not doing well because often this is a very emotionally challenging and exhausting process for everybody. The handover is actually only the moment of entrusting ourselves or entrusting a company, an organization, or a family-owned business to the next generation. And it's an emotionally challenging moment, but also movement all along the way for everybody involved, for those who is giving, and also for those people, those persons who are receiving on the other end. And it really starts, it's not a moment in time, it really starts many years beforehand, because at some point in time, the owners realize that they are soon facing a new chapter in their life. And it's not necessarily an handover due to age. It could be also that people just want to do something different and sell the company. So we have very different facets of, let's say, transition, handover, and selling our whole company. That's a very rich topic, which we will probably encounter in this series more often. I like this quote from Bert Hellinger, which he once said in one seminar: "The new always feels light." And this is true. I mean, if we observe that for ourselves, if we have a new idea and we can go forward with it, it unleashes an enormous amount of energy, and we want to do nothing else. We want it to succeed. And then once we have found the middle ground and the path moving forward, there's nothing that can seem to stop us. So the question is always, how can renewal succeed, and what moves renewal? And I like the dual meaning of this word, what moves renewal, because really in the context, and I call it the systemic duality of what is happening, it's on one side the question, what are the conditions for initiating such a movement of renewal and innovation? So we need to understand the orders in which the system is embedded, but also the entanglements. And these are rooted in for example, in the past. It could be in the family of origin, or the past of a whole company or an organization. And what are the connections between those? And then, of course, the question is, what are the enablers? And what is the movement that actually unfolds, and what is the impact? Is there a good solution for it? Is it going in the right direction? And this is what we are actually looking at in the context of systemic constellation. It is always rooted in the past and in the present moment. We are looking very much in the present moment, of course, to see what needs to be seen, what needs to be acknowledged, and what are the hidden dynamics that want to come to the surface, so that we can get new insights and idea about a feasible way moving forward. How can renewal and innovation succeed? This is the theme for the Renewal series. And as I mentioned, this is just a way to, our first webinar is only just the beginning, and a way to get in tune and in contact with this topic. Moving forward, what we are planning to do and what I have in mind for this webinar and other forms of engagement is to work with some key topics and first highlight some of the key topics. Oftentimes I get asked, okay, how do you work in this context? How do you work with innovation topics or renewal topics, especially when it comes to, let's say, larger groups or organizations? So my idea here is to work with some examples and also give some practical information. So the topics may include, of course, first to how to get into resonance. And here I can highlight already one thing that I have published recently. It's called the 3 Essential Meditations for Renewal. And this comes directly from the work. And I put together a small mini course about this, an online mini course and a booklet, which help us to get in resonance with the topic. And I recommend to listen to that once in a while in order to get back to the key themes and the key levers of innovation and renewal. Then there's a interesting let's say, excursion that we can make into the inherent orders of family systems and organization systems. So we need to understand what are the principles that, you know, the field of family constellations, etc., has discovered over the years, and what are the dynamics that go along with these inherent orders. Then I will speak a bit more about how it is to work as a constellation facilitator with a special focus on the attitude. And here, most importantly, I will over time focus more on the new way of doing family constellations. Of course, we will take a look at some classical approaches and classical topics, but more and more, I think it is important to turn ourselves towards the new way of doing family constellations as it is being discovered and taught by Berit and Sophie Hellinger, for example. And the main focus, I think that's where I have a wealth of experience that I can share here with the audience, is in the context of organizations and businesses. There's also an increasing interest about this. And of course, the topic of leadership and management, which I think is very central. I will speak about that in one of the next blog posts and webinars about it. Also from my own personal experience, what I have discovered in my own leadership development path and my journey, when I hit certain roadblocks, and what I can see now in hindsight about these movements. So if you like this series now and moving forward, I would like to suggest that you subscribe to the YouTube channel and also to the mailing list. The idea here is that the mailing list offers a good way to stay in touch about the topics, and we're making announcements there about future webinars and seminars. If you would like to get in touch with me, just send email to constellations@wittigonia.net. For example, if you would like to suggest a topic for an upcoming session or webinar, if you would like to suggest a seminar location, or if you would like to host a seminar, I would very much like to consider that, especially in the European area. I'm visiting a lot of countries in Europe, and so if it works out, I'd be happy to join and lead a seminar or co-lead a seminar if you like. And so here's some further information. You can find the Constellateur information on your preferred social channels, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, etc. And of course, there's our website, of course, which I would recommend. Now, I think it's time to turn to the Q&A. I will cover a couple of questions here live at the webinar. And then, as I mentioned before, there will be also an opportunity to answer questions in the social networks, for example, on the Facebook page. If you go to Facebook and search for Constellateur, or I'm not sure if I mentioned that beforehand, but there's a Facebook group called Renewal Seminar. So feel free to join us there, and then I will answer questions there as well. Okay, thank you for your interest. And I can say also, I found this very interesting how many people joined and signed up for the webinar. It seems to be a very interesting topic for a lot of people. So opening up, I should probably take a look if there's some questions coming in. Let's see, I don't see any live questions right now, but I will cover for now a couple of the questions which were submitted beforehand. So the question is from one participant: what is the difference when you work with organizations versus individuals and families? In fact, this is a question I get fairly often. And as I mentioned before, my first focus area and my first interest was, I was really keen on learning about how to work this with family constellations in the business context. And this goes back to my very first experience in a seminar where I had no idea what family constellation is. And when I joined the seminar, which was a live seminar with Bert Hellinger at that time, I was immediately deeply touched, and I really had goosebumps because I realized, wow, this is something that I had no idea existed even in myself, and regardless in others. So I really wanted to know everything about it. And my natural inclination was to learn everything in the context of business. But the route goes over the own discovery of the family system and ourselves with the relationship to fathers and mothers and so on. And so in the context of businesses, there are some specialties, which I will cover, once in a while in this webinar here. But there are other people and other entities belonging to a company, for example. Even the company itself, I mean, we only say the firm, the company, the organization. Some people actually discover that also this group of people, which we call the firm, has seems to have a life in its own. It has some group conscience, and it has certain properties like what we call culture, or the soul even of an organization. So it's important to recognize that and work with it. And as I mentioned before, a company also doesn't stand isolated. It is always embedded in the context of all the individuals and their particular family systems, which contribute to the system of an organization. Okay, let me see. I have one more question here, which was also submitted up front. And the question is about cultural differences. So the person, I'm not sure where the person came from, because we don't have any location information here, but the question was about other cultural differences and how you work with companies in different cultures. Also very interesting questions. When we actually come together for some international constellations or seminars, what we found is that there are of course nuances in different countries, and there are different histories in countries. Every country has its own history, but the underlying movements and sometimes even entanglements that lead to certain movements or blockages are often very similar and pretty much the same. So that's a big moment of aha and discovery for a lot of people. And that's, I think, what makes this work also so interesting and rich, because the work with the soul and the spirit movement really doesn't distinguish between language barriers, or not even less with the geographical barriers. So it's a very interesting way of working. In the context, again, and to contrast that a little bit with the work in larger organizations, from my personal experience, I can say it is interesting to work with very diverse international teams. I had the privilege early on in my career to lead international teams and also to resolve challenges. Sometimes I wish, looking back now, that I would have known earlier about family constellation, because it would have given me a lot of insights, probably in a much shorter period of time. But it is interesting, of course, also to acknowledge how people work and communicate with each other. But again, even in the context of organizational constellations, we find so many similarities across cultures and across geographic borders that it really can be considered as some kind of a common language that people can discover and for themselves and together and learn with each other. So that's why I'm very passionate and enthusiastic about working with this this approach of systemic constellations. Yeah, there was one question. I think it's a very specific question about a situation which I don't want to go into detail. There's much information which was said, but it is about a company where the owners or the owner, I'm not sure if it's a family or the group of owners, let's say, are in severe conflict and they are attacking each other. That's actually very interesting topic. I had several of these situations to deal with myself, doing family or organizational constellations, and sometimes it can have different outcomes, of course, and sometimes it happens that one person is taking over. And sometimes it happens that none of them is able to take over, and all of them have to leave and make place for a new generation. It really depends. So there's no general rule of thumb, I would say. I would say there is one rule of thumb which I heard and which I certainly subscribe to, which makes a lot of sense in the things that I have seen in constellations. And that is the person who had the idea first should be the one to lead. Now, if you think about that and digest that for a moment, look around in the situations that you have and maybe even experienced yourself, you will probably find that this is often true in many cases, that the person who had the original idea and intention is kind of the pivotal person in the whole system. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't want to expand too much on it because it's a very rich topic in itself. Okay, so I think that's it for today. I would like to thank everybody. I don't think we have any further questions here. Let me check. I would like to thank everybody for joining. And if you would like to attend the next webinar, so please sign up to the email newsletter on our website, or also subscribe to the YouTube channel. There we will also show the replay. This webinar that we had here today will be made available. So those of you who registered through the link will receive an email with the replay information, and you can look back at it later. And we'll also probably publish this on our YouTube channel. So I would be very happy if you could also share the information, because it gets more and more interesting the more people are joining. Okay, that's it for today. And now I wish you happy renewal and innovation. Goodbye.